And welcome to the Win, Make, Give podcast. Once again, Chad Hyams here with no Bob Stewart. That's right. I'm just getting rid of the guy finally. Folks, you've heard enough of these episodes where Bob just doesn't happen to make it. He sends his apologies. He messaged me before. He said, I'm going to miss this one. And Chad, I know we're interviewing an amazing guest today, and it's one I really wanted to be a part of. Now, why did Bob want to be a part of this one? Well, because Bob needs the lessons. We all know that. Yet mainly because you might recognize one or two of the things we say today, because we found this guest while we were doing research for one of our episodes in the past, where Bob and I talked to you guys earlier this season about being mentally strong. And one of the articles that we used for some of our research that we shared with you, lo and behold, we were then reached out to the author, got connected, and brought him here today. And we want to welcome to the Win, Make, Give podcast, Scott. Scott, thanks for joining us here today.
Chad, that's the kind of power you have. You could summon people from with her to come onto your show. That's the kind of juice you have. So I'm glad to be here today to talk about a topic I'm passionate about.
You know, Scott, it was amazing. It really was. We did this episode, Bob and I. We recorded it. It hasn't even been dropped at the time you and I are talking now. It's in the bank, getting ready to go whenever Dave gets around to it. And not a day later, I got an email from the people you're using to get some podcast connections out there. And I said, why does that name sound so familiar to me? And immediately Googled your name and said, Bob, you'll never believe it. The guy whose article we just did an episode about yesterday is here. So, Scott, I don't do bios. I don't read them. I don't like them. Yet everybody needs to have a general idea who you are. So do me a favor, introduce yourself to our audience however it is you want to.
Yeah, sure. Well, my name is Scott Mautz, folks, Mautz. I've written multiple books, including my latest, The Mentally Strong Leader. I'm a corporate exile, Chad. I spent 3 decades in the corporate world, including over 2 decades at Procter & Gamble, kind of growing up in that organization and leading some of their largest multi-billion-dollar businesses. I also write for CNBC, and I've worked with Indiana University's executive education program in the past. And I'm just, really glad to be here today to talk about mental strength with you.
And you've got a beautiful brick wall there beside you. As our audience knows, we use video to see each other. We don't record it. So folks, just imagine beautiful brick wall. Scott had this beautiful setup, his book, some flowers, the beautiful brick wall. He's looking good in his vest and his dress shirt. Here I am in workout gear, just standing at home for this. Scott, thank you so much. I love Procter & Gamble as a company. One of my best friends growing up, his mom was an executive with Procter & Gamble Canada. And I know they always brought great value, great training to their people. So having been with their organization, I know you learned a lot and shared a lot with them growing up. If I could, what's your one takeaway from your experience with Procter & Gamble?
It has deserved its reputation, Chad, as being a leadership factory. In fact, this is statistics, it's not my opinion, that no company in the United States produces more CEOs, people that go on to be CEOs in other companies, than Procter & Gamble, especially not only within Procter & Gamble, within the function that I worked in, which was in marketing and general management. So I got a chance to firsthand, learn those skills to make me good enough to run multi-billion-dollar businesses, but also really to experience some of the very best in leadership over the years in my time with them.
I love it. I love it. And folks, whether you know who Procter & Gamble is, you've heard the name, you can be sure at least 10 of their products are in your house right now. Right? They might not have their name on many of the products that they own through divisions of that. You can be sure your house is filled with Procter & Gamble merchandise without you even realizing it. Did you work with a specific line? I mean, did you work with a specific product at Procter & Gamble through your time?
All kinds of product. I was blessed enough to be able to run the Pampers business, the Charmin business, the Gain laundry detergent business, Dawn dish detergent, Joy dish detergent, Cascade detergent. So I had a chance to work on almost every piece of business at Procter & Gamble to really kind of expand just kind of the diversity of my thinking and the way I
I
approach
love it, folks. What you just learned is if you have dish soap in your house, it's probably a Procter and Gamble product, as you heard one of those various lines all being named in there. All right, I'll get off Procter and Gamble. I just had such respect growing up for their company, from the things I always heard from my friend's mom when she would talk about them. Okay, you wrote a book. Well, you've written a few books, yet the book we're really talking about right now, and the article that caught our attention, is The Mentally Strong Leader. Let's just get the plug out of the way. We'll come back to it for everybody later. Where's the best place for them to get a copy of The Mentally Strong Leader when they finish this episode and say, I want to read more?
Oh, sure. Yeah. You can find it at scottmautz.com. You can, pick from the variety of locations you can buy it. Then at the end of the show, I'll also give the listeners a free 60-page PDF download that I prepared for this episode today.
There
That
you
will,
go, folks.
you'll see what that's going to be about as we talk here. But yeah, scottmautz.com
Perfect.
if you want to find it.
I love it. Okay. And his last name spelled Mautz, right? Or
That's
Zed,
right.
if you're north of the
Zed.
border listening
right.
to this. Mautz, not like mouse. It's there's the T and the Z in there to spell it. Okay. So, Scott, if I were going to ask you just one question about a mentally strong leader. We have a ton of leaders that listen to our podcast, entrepreneurs, people growing into leaders, people who find themselves as a leader, people who are already leaders. But if I had one question and you only had time to answer one for me, what would be the best question I could ask you to get the best lesson about being a mentally strong leader? And then answer the question once you ask yourself the question.
That's a good way to put it. Chad, maybe this surprises you, maybe it doesn't. First of all, what exactly is mental strength? And how do I become mentally stronger? Because a lot of people have kind of a misperception of what it really is and what it really stands for. So I'm going to start there and answer that question.
Okay.
So we're all working from the same page. Mental strength, it's not just, Chad, it's not just EQ, emotional intelligence, which of course is the ability to get your emotions working for you versus against you.
Yep.
It's bigger than that. Mental strength is the ability to regulate not only your emotions, but your thoughts and your behaviors productively, even in adversity. As I like to shorthand it, it's how we manage internally so that we can lead better externally at work and in life too. And here's the thing, Chad, I think most of us intuitively understand, even with that definition, that if you want to succeed at life and at work, you already know you have to self-regulate. You can't just say whatever you think. You can't behave any way you want. You can't let your emotions translate immediately into your act. We know that. But here's the scoop for you here today and your listeners. Guess what? Self-regulating all of that is really, really hard. It's really hard to do that. So that gets to the second part of my question. Okay, Scott, you got me. So how do I do that? Well, you go down a layer deeper in the definition, Chad. Mental strength actually consists of 6 mental muscles, which are fortitude, confidence, boldness, decision-making, goal focus, and messaging. The ability to stay positively minded, even in the face of negativity. And the more that you can work on these 6 mental muscles, like if you equate them to your physical muscles, it's a very similar process. If you wanted to get ripped, if you really wanted to get built up and be super muscular, you obviously know this. You got to go to the gym and you got to do exercises and you got to keep at it or you'll turn flabby. Yep. Same thing with using your mental muscles, Chad, that equate to mental strength. You got to go to the gym and you have to do that in the form of frameworks and systems that help you get repetitions in so you can build habits based on whatever muscle it is that you're going to be working on. Now, the last part of answering my own question. So how do I know what muscles that I have to work on? Well, in the Mentally Strong Leader, Chad, Chapter 2 is all about taking the mental strength self-assessment. It's something
there it is. We love assessments.
We love assessments, right? I've been working on this one with a data scientist for almost 3 years. So that it takes you, 15 minutes, Chad. That's it. Okay. 50 questions, 50 questions, 15 minutes. And when you're done with that, as long as you're honest and you're introspective and you're reflective and you're willing to be vulnerable even with yourself, it produces a result that tells you which tier of mental strength do you fall in, all the way from the top tier, which, I call the beacon tier. You're actually a beacon to others of mental strength because you're so strong in that aspect, all the way down to the quote unquote lowest tier, which is the novice tier, right? Where you're just learning about mental strength. And no tier is any better than any other, really. It's all about you and your own journey. And the assessment also gives you a score by mental muscle. What's your fortitude score? How confident are you really? How bold are you really? How decisive are you really? And so on. And in knowing where you start from with that assessment, and it produces a well correlated, statistically speaking, assessment of where you stand on mental strength in each one of the mental muscles. You could then build your own customized mental strength training regimen that's exactly right for you, using the 50 plus tools in the book, The Mentally Strong Leader. So a long answer to a question, but there is layers to that question. So
Yeah, it's a great answer. Uh, Look, I mean, yes, I've got gym equipment over my shoulder, so you're knowing, you're saying, right? Yeah, you get it, Chad. When I'm talking about working out, you want muscles in your legs, you're not doing bicep curls,
yeah,
right? You want
that's right.
muscles in your arms, you're not doing squats all day. You want to be able to do cardio. That's a completely different thing. You're right. We need the right training plan. And I don't know how many times I see somebody say, I want to do this, and they're doing these exercises. The same thing would be true with our mentals. What I'm gathering from you, there are those 6 categories. I'm going to have you run them again. And if I have, I think one of them was confidence, right? I think I caught that. I didn't get my pen in time. I got confidence coming out my ears, right? To a point that sometimes my wife says, you're a little too confident with the things that you do, right? Take that down. What that tells me is my confident muscle is probably large, right?
Yes.
I've probably built that one up over time. However, yet maybe my messaging muscle is a little weak. I think that was one of the ones I also
Yeah.
caught in there. I need to know the right exercises to be doing. So first, let's have you run that 6 for me again. You ran them down. I'm going to write them quicker. Some of our audience wants to hear them. Those 6 areas were.
Yeah. The confidence, which is pretty
Yep.
self-explanatory, fortitude or resilience, the ability to push through and solve problems. Then, of course, there's boldness, the willingness to take risks, put your neck out there, and to do the unexpected. So the
Okay.
first 3 are confidence, fortitude, boldness. Next 3, decision making, the ability to make high quality decisions without bias and be decisive. Then there's goal focus, the ability to stay focused on your goals and keep those around you focused on the goals that are important for your organization or for your endeavor. And then finally, messaging, which is the ability to stay positive minded, even in the face of negativity, which can be a really difficult thing to do in today's world. And it's also about keeping a purity of intent so that people know you're always acting with a sense of integrity and that the message you're sending to the troops around you is always a positive one and the one that you want. So, yeah, those are the 6 core mental muscles of mental strength.
Okay. And folks, I hope you got that right. Confidence, fortitude, boldness, decision making, goal focus, and messaging. If you needed them again, if you missed one while you were writing them, uh, Scott, I'm going to give you props as being the first person in the 400 plus episodes that we have that has a list, and you didn't turn it into an acronym. Right, I don't have some crazy word of right that describes what those would be or something. So good job on not forcing it to become some other acronym that we would remember. You made a comment that I was waiting for you to hopefully make. Otherwise, I was going to add it, and that was that last one: messaging in today's world.
Yeah.
Right, there's a lot going on in today's world, and when this episode drops, some of it will have been dealt with because the election will probably have happened. You and I are talking before the election, yet the election will probably have happened by the time this episode dropped. Hopefully, some of the conflicts around the world will be solved. Okay, everybody, there is nobody that's not living in fantasy land, right, that doesn't need to strengthen this muscle.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so
I think that's right.
be my trainer. Give me one exercise that
I'll
I
do it.
could do right now to strengthen my messaging muscle, since the book's going to tell me all of them.
We'll do it. We'll do it right now. And there's plenty of exercises for each muscle. And I also wanted to comment before we dive into the messaging muscle on something that you said, Chad, quickly. That you have a really strong confidence muscle, right? So let's say that, and I'm making this up. Let's say that you also had really strong thigh muscles. When you go to the gym, You don't go into the gym and say, I'm going to work on every muscle for 20 hours straight every time I go to the gym. Thursday's back day, Friday's leg day, Wednesday's arms day, whatever it is. So part of getting, much more mentally strong is having that regimen and committing it to it over time. It doesn't have to be intimidating. This isn't something that you go out and rush into. So to your point of, messaging, let's say that you take that assessment and you discern like, man, I've got work to do on staying positive, even in the face of negativity. One of the places that I most get asked about, and I'm going to train you on a tool right now that's
Okay.
really powerful. I've been teaching it for a very long time. And Chad, I'm telling you, it really works. One of the questions I get most often is, how do I navigate my negative emotions in the moment when I'm feeling the heat right then? So I get it. You got to, in the face of setbacks, you have to step back. You have to plow your way through adversity. You got that. I'm talking about when I'm in the moment with someone and I feel like I'm going to lose my cool. And I know that doing that doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help the situation.
So you're talking about when I'm on the phone with Comcast and their artificial intelligence person and I'm yelling operator, operator. You're like that moment in my life, right?
That kind of thing,
Yeah, okay.
that kind of thing. And I'll even use it as an example to teach what I call the redirect rhythm. And
Okay.
I'm telling you, Chad, this really, really works. And we're going to use an example here. So let's say, Chad, that I work for you on your podcast. I don't know, I'm an engineer. And I'm the one that's in charge of making it sound right. And I, do the scheduling and the booking for you and all of that stuff, right? And I make a mistake yet again. And it's the same one I made before. And you call me into your office and you're really frustrated. You're feeling really frustrated with me because this is a mistake I made before, but you know that I don't respond well to you losing your cool. You work with me long enough to know that. So you
Okay.
have to navigate what you're feeling in the moment because you just discovered another error that I've made that was kind of sloppy. So you call me in, you sit down, and you take just a few steps in what's called the redirect rhythm. The first step, you intuitively already know that you should take it. And I'm going to explain why, though, it's so important and why it works. The first step is you just have to create space. You have to take a breath. And most of us already know that. So if you're like, okay, Scott, really? That's your insight? I need to take a breath when I'm feeling like I'm about to lose my cool? Hold on. It's the first step. It's a trigger step. Here's what happens when you do that, Chad. Before addressing me, when you take a breath and just breathe in and out slowly, you already know that it slows down your heart rate. It allows you to focus better. It reduces your stress. You already know that. Here's what you might not know from a neuroscientist, kind of a neuro perspective, it creates distance for you from the intensity of your emotion. It allows you to break the gravitational pull of this emotion that is dragging you somewhere you simply do not want to be. You have to create space between the emotion and where it's taking you. And you do that by taking a breath. Now, when that space is created, you fill it with something else. And that's you immediately go to the next step, which is you name the emotion you're feeling. You say, okay, you're taking a deep breath. You've created distance from that emotional pull, that gravitational pull that's taking you where you don't want to go, and you name it. I'm feeling frustrated right now. You're not saying I'm a frustrated person. I'm always frustrated at Scott. You happen to be feeling frustration. Once you name the emotion, Chad, it begins to lose its hold over you. It becomes this entity outside of your body that you're recognizing it. You can spot it. And because you can spot it and point to it, you can start to overcome that. Once you've named it, you go to the last step, which is really kind of a bing bing. You just reassess and you redirect. In that moment, you say, okay, so what's really happening is I'm feeling frustrated. I'm about to lose my cool. I know that ain't going to help. So what I'm going to do instead is redirect. I've reassessed where I'm going to redirect what's next? What can I do instead for Scott that's going to be very more productive? And this all triggers from taking a breath, which people already know that they should do, but they don't know why it works. As long as you take that breath and then name what you're feeling and then quickly reassess and redirect, I'm telling you, Chad, it becomes a habit and it really works every time, simply triggered by first starting by taking a deep breath in that moment, right? Does that make sense?
100%, right? And as you said, it's not rocket science. The first part of that, of the take
Right,
the breath, we need to hear it. Yet, how many people take the breath and then just go with the frustration, right? They don't name it, and
right.
or they take it, right? They say I'm
That's right.
frustrated instead of, like you said, just say, right, I feel frustrated right now, or whatever that, right, and then being able to redirect it normally we just take the breath and then we skip step 2 or 3 and think that breath magically solved everything.
That's right. But it's that cognitive reappraisal that you have to engage in. And, by the way, if you're a research nerd like I am, you might even recognize this is what behavioral therapists, cognitive behavioral therapists call the 3 C's. You catch it, you check it, you change it. If that works better for you, great, use that. The only thing that I don't like about the 3 C's, catch it, check it, change it, is it doesn't include that really critical step of actually naming the emotion so that it becomes distance from you and you become more informed about what to do about that thing so you can break its hold over you once you've named it. But,
See,
that's
there we got the 3 C's.
Yeah.
Right. We got the acronyms. We got the 3 C's. So far, Scott is definitely an outlier, and he stays away from that stuff and just says, look, here's the facts, people. You go give it your own crazy names if that's what you want to do. Okay. I'm talking today with Scott Mautz. It's Mautz. His website is his name, scottmautz.com. The book is The Mentally Strong Leader that we're talking about. We've already talked about what is important about being a mentally strong leader. We've already talked about what it means to be mentally strong, right? We're flying through a lot of this stuff, folks. The book is going to be one that'll end up on my shelf. That's for sure. And we just talked about the 6 different areas. We can dive into other areas. I'd love to dive into other areas, yet I don't want to go there yet, Scott. I want to take you somewhere else on this journey from something you said. Then maybe we can go back to 1 or 2 of the areas and said, okay, give me another workout exercise. Give me another one. I just want bigger. Okay, bicep curls. I got it. Give me squats, the obvious ones.
You got it.
You mentioned a word in there though that I obsess over the word, and the word was habit.
Yeah.
Right. You mentioned habit. I take the term creature of habit as a compliment, right?
Yes.
I want to be as habitual as possible. It does not interfere with spontaneity, folks. Stop thinking that because you have habits, you can't be spontaneous and you can't have fun. Habit brings discipline. Discipline brings results. So I'm a huge believer in habit. There's been a lot of studies on habit. Right. I've shared from our friend Jay Papasan, Gary Keller. They wrote The One Thing. I used to train information from that book on habits in there. I want your perspective of habits, how important you believe habits are, how we go about building a habit. I want to hear Scott's take on the habit conversation that has become, James Clear is talking, everybody's talking habits. Let's hear Scott's take on how to build them, how to make them strong, and how to keep them forever once we have them.
Yes, I feel so strongly about what you're saying, Chad, that I put it in the subtitle of the book. So the subtitle of The Mentally Strong Leader is Build Habits to Productively Regulate Your Emotions, Your Thoughts, and Your Behaviors. And here's why. Because, like I said up front, this is hard. Like, we all know that we need to self-regulate, right? We know I'm not going to win the Nobel Prize for bringing that insight to the table. We know that. But it is really, really hard to do that. So that arm around your listener, that the person, that thing that they can lead on is habit building science. And I, I've been studying habits for as long as James Clear has, I would argue. And, I've come to learn a lot of the things that he also espouses, which is, habits, they really come from repetitions. They come from systems and frameworks. And no, they don't have to be acronyms, but it is, no question about it. If you want to build your arm muscles, you got to do reps. You got to have a system where a certain type of curl works for you without throwing out your back. You want to build your shoulder muscles. You got to know what framework to operate within so you don't hurt yourself and you do it right. So it takes systems and frameworks. And in the book, The Mentally Strong Leader, I use habit building science, Chad, to create the systems and the frameworks for every one of the 50 plus tools. And I include 2 other really key parts of habit building science. Every tool in the book of the over 50 plus tools to help you become mentally stronger, depending on the muscle, they all include 2 important insights of habit building science. First of all, what is your first small step that you need to take in building that habit? Because habit building science shows us, Chad, a lot of the reasons we don't build the habits that we want to is we don't know where to even start. And it feels so daunting, we don't engage in the effort of even trying. But if you could take that first small step and that leads to another small step and that leads to another small step, huge for building a habit. Second thing that I build into the book, and it's core to habit building science, is there's a section for every tool titled In Moments of Weakness. The opposite of mentally strong is not mentally weak. We all have a baseline of mental strength to build from, Chad. But that said, we do have moments of weakness we do have to work through. That's called being a human being. And a lot of habit building breaks down when we face a moment of weakness and we cave into it. And the habit is broken, the cycle is broken, the system and the framework fall apart. So you have to know what to do when weakness inevitably arises. And so I build that as well into the each of the tools in the mentally strong leader. So yes, big fan of habit building. The science behind it is central to the book, The Mentally Strong Leader.
Give me a tip to build habits, right? Give me a tip. You gave a great one already, whether anyone caught it or not, right? Start small, right? What's the thing you need to do to start? Because if you say, oh, I'm going to go drink a gallon of water a day just to pick right, you're going to be like 2 glasses in and be like, I'm done. If it's drink 1 more glass every day, okay, there's a small habit I'm developing, or just track my water every day. That's going to be a habit I'm going to develop. Give me a tip for all of our audience. They've heard it from me. They've heard it from James Clear. They've heard it from them, but it hasn't clicked with them yet, Scott. What are you going to tell them right now that they're going to finally go, oh, I get it. Let me go build that habit.
I think this is different than anything your listeners have heard before, Chad, in my opinion. You build a habit when you understand why it's important to build a habit and how you need to build a habit. Here's what I've found with my book. I have found this to be true. I'm already hearing it from thousands of readers already. If you start by taking the mental strength self-assessment, you understand which muscles need to strengthen. When you understand your case uniquely, rather than just a generic exposure to everybody, when you understand your case uniquely, you understand that it's going to take a unique set of circumstances for you to become mentally stronger based on how your assessment goes. When you start from a place of, this author has helped me to truly understand how it is in my world, that is an essential motivator to say, now I feel like my effort going into building habits is going to work because it's geared to me. It's not geared to everyone. It's geared to me. So it's starting with the belief that your habit building efforts are actually going to pay out disproportionately because you're applying it to a scenario that's unique to you. And I've seen that happen time and time again. That's what readers are telling me is happening when they start with a mental strength self-assessment.
I love that. Right. I mean, we hear people talk about the motivation, the big why, those terms about it. Yet we never apply those to habits. And we never just say, hey, this is what it's going to do for me when I create the habit of going to sleep at this time, or waking up at this time, or writing in my gratitude journal, or doing one of these 50 exercises that you're giving me in the book. What a powerful statement, Scott, to be able to say to us, look, it's not that it takes X number of days, and it's not that it's this. You've got to understand the motivation behind the reason you're creating the habit. That's going to be the thing that's going to help you create the habit.
Yeah, and how many times, Chad? Listen. I've done this myself, where I'll read an article about, if you want to build a habit for blah blah blah, here's how you do it, and then you read those things and you're like, yeah, maybe that works for other people. That doesn't really apply to me. That's not my world, right? Well, imagine if you could just say, no. But what you're going to do is start with your world. Now picture a habit working for you in your scenario. It changes the game, Chad. It changes your willingness to build habits.
I love that, Scott. All right, let's go back to the 6, right? Let's
go
back to the 6. Folks, if you didn't catch them again, confidence, fortitude, boldness, decision-making, goal focus, and messaging. We talked about messaging.
So let's talk boldness. Sorry.
Is that where you want to go? Boldness?
Well, only because I get asked about that so much, or and or confidence. But let me not interrupt you, Chad. No. What do you want to talk about?
I was going to ask you to say which, not that you'll ever pick your favorite child, right? You would never do it. Yet of the 5 remaining, in case messaging was your favorite, which one's your favorite, or which one? Scott, let's do this different. You say you get asked a lot about boldness and confidence.
Yes.
Okay, let's take those off the table.
Yeah.
Right. Let's be the podcast that asks you about the one that nobody's ever asking you about. And then let's dive into it a little bit, and then give me an exercise that our audience could do to strengthen their blank, whichever one you want to attack.
Yeah, right on. I don't get asked as much about decision making, Chad. I can tell you that for sure. And because most people believe incorrectly that they're, more good. They're better at decision making than they think they are. And here's the thing, Chad. See, emotion and bias and undisciplined thinking, they're all like the enemies of good decision making, right?
Yeah.
So self-regulation skills, play a huge role here because they give you the courage and the conviction to not only be decisive, but the ability to make good decisions that propel you towards what you're trying to achieve. And I'll give you an example. A tool in the book helps you, I call it the bias buster. It
Okay.
lists out the dozen most, and I won't go through all dozen, but the dozen most common biases that we encounter that we don't even know we're experiencing as human beings that impact how we make decisions.
Give me
If
an
I can,
example of one.
I'm going to give you an example maybe of one that most of us have experienced. For example,
Okay.
the confirmation bias, right? This is the tendency to search for, interpret, and favor information that confirms the decision that you want to make anyways, that
Yes.
confirms your beliefs, that confirms, what you were going to do anyways. And if you know you're engaged in that bias, right? The solution to that is to invite people in to challenge your point of view, to disprove what you're inclined to already decide. You have to accept inevitabilities sooner and stop looking for data to support the answer that you already want. And what happens with this is more and more biases pile up that we're not aware of. There's other ones I talk about, like the sunk cost bias, which is also known by psychologists as the IKEA effect, which is when you overvalue something as a result of putting so much effort into it, right? That's why we love to buy IKEA furniture so much, Chad, because
Now
you
I
get
get
done
it.
with it and you're like, man, I really, that cost a lot, but I put a lot of effort into it. I feel good about this desk. It looks great, doesn't it? That's the sunk cost effect. And the solution to that is to just look at resources that you've invested. The time, the money, the effort, the people hours, they're non-recoverable costs. They're part of the cost of doing business. Your job isn't to recover your investment. It's to make the best decision with the data that you have. And there's 10 others of these. The point is, if you can work on being more intentional in being aware about the most common dozen biases that impact our decision making, believe me, and I see this happen over and over again, you are more equipped to spot them. And then when you spot them, there's also solutions in the Mentally Strong Leader to help you with that. And it makes you a much, much, much better decision maker, which isn't the first thing people think of, Chad, when they think of mental strength. People, mental strength, that must be fortitude, right? Sure. Confidence, yes. Being bold, yes. Making better decisions requires mental strength. You betcha, especially when there's so many biases that can get in the way.
And you're absolutely right. And they're not going to go away, right?
They're
The
not going to go
confident, or none of those biases are going to go. It's being aware of them is what I'm hearing from you, and
Yes.
saying, look, I'm going to have the confirmation bias is always going to be there. So I'm going to go ask somebody else before I make that decision to make sure that I'm not just choosing because I'm looking for it to solve what I believe already, or what all the other biases that are in there. They're not going away, right? You're not going to become taller or shorter. You're going to stay the same height.
Yes.
It's just becoming aware of this is what it is, and I just have to acknowledge it before I make the decision.
Yeah, the analogy I would draw for you, Chad, just to talk about confidence for a second in parallel with decision making, is that
Okay.
Confidence is not the absence of doubt. It isn't. Confidence is your ability to manage your relationship with doubt, because we all have that relationship. Even, of the, 3,000 plus people that I've interviewed for the book, The Mentally Strong Leader, even the most confident ones wouldn't look at me and say, you know what, Scott, I never experienced doubt. We all have a relationship with that. Similarly with decision making, we all have biases. Great decision making is not the absence of bias, because it's unrealistic. We all have biases. You just have to be aware of which you tend to fall victim to more often, which is what the tool in the Mentally Strong Leader helps you to do, to identify your weaknesses and then assess accordingly. And I even have people that use the bias buster chart. Anytime they're about to make a good decision, a big decision, they'll go through the chart to make sure, I know I fall for biases. Let me go through to make sure none of those are applying right now, because this is an important decision to make.
Another great lesson. All right. Before I ask him the last question, folks, it's Scott Mautz. It's MAUTZ.com. You can get yourself the copy of The Mentally Strong Leader. You can connect with everything that Scott's got on his website. Scott, if they want to connect with you, is there a spot on the website? I don't have it up in front of me to contact you, or is there a better way if they wanted to say, Scott, I want to know more or learn more?
Sure, you can go to scottmautz.com. You can find out about the keynotes I give on any of my topics, especially on the book, The Mentally Strong Leader, which you can also find there. And for listeners today, I also put together a 60-page free PDF that I mentioned earlier, Chad. So if you want that mental strength self-assessment that I was talking about for free, and if you want prompts to help you get the most out of the book, The Mentally Strong Leader, you can get it in a free downloadable 60-page PDF format. All you have to do is go to scottmautz.com/mentally strong gift, and you can download that free PDF.
Mentally Strong Gift. I'm typing it so I remember it after, folks. That's Scott Mautz, MAUTZ.com/mentally strong gift. I'm looking at it right in the middle of the page. There's your 60-page companion workbook that's going to come with that, and a way for you to get the book right there, and Scott's weekly information that he puts out. Okay, so Scott, maybe it's something you've already said and you really feel you need to say it again. Maybe it's something completely new that we didn't even talk about. Maybe it's got nothing to do with being mentally strong leader. It's something from one of your other books or something. If you could share one final message with our audience, what is it you'd want to leave them with today?
Stop chasing approval and start chasing authenticity. And I say that because, Chad, I've had so many people that I've coached over the years that weren't mentally strong enough to give in to the temptation to chase approval. And when we start to chase approval, we slowly become farther and farther from the person that we really are. And it's a soul-sucking endeavor. So stop chasing approval. Start chasing authenticity. Keep in mind who you are, what you stand for, what your values are, and let that lead the way.
Folks, nothing's wrong with your podcast. I'm just leaving that to sit for a moment there in silence. Right? Wow. How many of us are doing that the wrong way, right? Chasing the approval, not chasing authenticity. That's the word right now, right? Authenticity. Are we being authentic to who we are, to what we stand for, what we believe in, right? So many people are not being authentic to that. Folks, it's one of the things that gets me in trouble, right? That's where my EQ score suffers, because I am authentic. You know it if you know me, and that's why sometimes there's lack of empathy in that EQ for me that we talked about at the beginning of the conversation. But you can be sure becoming a mentally strong leader is definitely a path for me. Scott, I am so glad Bob and I found that article, grabbed some of your tips for it. We're able to talk about it, and even more, that Bob couldn't join me today so I could monopolize this conversation with you. I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing with our audience.
Thanks so much, Chad. Thanks for what you and Bob do. The world needs it.
Well, thank you. Guys, it's Scott Mautz, MAUTZ.com. Check out his website. Put the /mentally strong gift at the end of it if you want that 60-page download that you can get your hands on, or if you want the easiest way to get to the book, go to his website. Folks, until our next episode, as always, do good.